Hello, Tony, your deck architect here, back on my channel once more with another deck profile. After a small break last week, we resume our coverage of Battle of Chaos with a deck chosen by you, the viewers. Combining the fury of the prehistoric with the power of that waifu laifu, today we're going to be taking a look at the Dinomorphia. So when one hears the word dino in this game, one often thinks of the dinosaurs of recent, powerful behemoths that can wreck boards and end games. Dinomorphia can be that, but in most cases they're actually quite the opposite. Designed as this weird combination of dino DNA and thick girls, the Dinomorphia instead employ a trap-focused strategy aimed at outgrinding opponents with superior float and control effects. The crux of their strategy revolves around two major themes. The first is the circulation of their resources through destruction, float, and fusion effects. The second, and more curious, is the reduction of your life such that you reach a low enough threshold to take advantage of powerful back-to-the-wall effects. These two themes, while highly unorthodox, afford the deck a high threshold for reckless play, as any non-lethal amount of damage to your life translates into huge benefits on the crackback. This all culminates to create a tempo deck that can take a few hits to deal harder ones back. And that's what I'm hoping to showcase as I get through this deck profile. Anyway, I believe I've droned on for long enough. Without a further ado, let's get into the deck profile. Getting right into it, we start things a little differently today as we begin by introducing the traps first. See, one of the more intriguing aspects of this deck is the fact that the archetype only has two main deck monsters to its name. With such a low monster count, the real meat of this archetype comes from its traps, a collection of 6 traps all aimed at facilitating your plays, of which we are playing 4. The first of these being of our 3 Dinomorphia Domain. Domain allows us to fusion summon a Dinomorphia fusion monster from our X deck using materials from our hand, field, or deck, which produces 2 very crucial benefits. The first, and more obvious, is the free fusion summoning of Dinomorphia fusion monsters, which grants us access to monsters that we can threaten our opponent with. The second, and more intrinsic, is the dumping of our Dinomorphia monsters from the deck. Recall in my intro that the Dinomorphia make use of float effects. Well, Domain's fusion effect allows us to load up the graveyard with Dinomorphias to be summoned by these float effects. Since there are only 2 main deck members in this archetype, this means that by dumping both with Domain, we effectively put our entire core monster lineup into circulation for access in future turns. This is by far the most powerful form of setup afforded to the deck, as resolving Domain generates all the necessary monster components needed for the deck to play the game. As such, Domain is a card that you absolutely want to get within the first few turns, and thus you'll find that we're playing a fair amount of cards aimed at getting access to it. And one card that pairs exceptionally well with our Domain is our next trap in our 2 Dinomorphia Alert. Alert allows us to target upwards of 2 Dinomorphias in our graveyard with a maximum total level of 8 and revive them from the graveyard. In the turn that this occurs, those monsters cannot attack, nor can you summon anything from your X deck but a Dinomorphia monster. However, that is hardly a drawback when you are granted what amounts to essentially a twin reborn for the deck. Now, obviously, you can use this card to revive the 2 Dinomorphias you dumped for your Domain, as, spoiler, all your main deck Dinomorphias are level 4. But note that this effect can revive upwards of 2 at a maximum level count of 8. That means that we can also revive a single monster with a level under 8 as well, which works to revive our level 6 fusions also. This means that even with only a single Dinomorphia in circulation, Alert is still a decent recovery tool, and with ample setup, Alert can be a powerful field generator that can easily put you back into the game. Next up is our 2 Dinomorphia Brute. Brute allows us to destroy a card our opponent controls alongside any Dinomorphia monster we control, non-targeting. This acts as our in-theme form of removal in the deck. Due to the fact that it does not target, Brute will always be able to destroy a card our opponent controls so long as they control a card on resolution. This is incredibly useful against responsive effects, as we can always reprioritize Brute's removal to ensure it hits something that matters. Even more fortunately, on the off chance our opponent has nothing to destroy when Brute resolves, Brute will not resolve to destroy your monster either, which saves resources. Furthermore, by destroying our own monsters with Brute, we create an outlet for them to trigger their float effects, which not only disrupts your opponent's game plan, but also advances ours as well. Lastly, we have our 2 Dinomorphia Sonic. Sonic is the only Dinomorphia counter trap we play of the 3 available to us. Activatable in response to a spell or trap activation, Sonic can negate that activation to then destroy a Dinomorphia monster we control. Like our Brute, Sonic acts as a form of disruption that also enables our own plays. Unfortunately, unlike Brute, Sonic is a little more conditional on what it can activate too, and as such is something that can be dead at times. However, having an in-theme spell and trap negator is incredibly key, as it gives us a searchable option to counter blowout cards like Evenly Matched and Lightning Storm. Make no mistake, Sonic will most likely not be your first search target for this deck, but in those cases where you've established, Sonic is a card you'll definitely want at least a single copy of to secure your board with. But that's not the only reason we're playing these traps. See, on top of their activated effects, each of the Dinomorphia traps also possess a graveyard effect as well. While you are under 2000 life points, each of these traps can banish themselves from the graveyard to protect you from a form of damage. Domain, Alert, and Brute all banish themselves to protect you from effect damage for the turn, while Sonic can banish itself to protect you from 1 battle damage inflicted this turn. These effects help you when you're at a lower life to allow you to survive the likely lethal damage that you might receive. And you're very likely going to be at this low threshold because for the power that these traps provide, they also require that you pay half your life each to activate. This means that within 2 activations of any of these traps, you'll already be at that 2000 threshold needed to make use of these effects. And that's weirdly where you want to be. In many cases, it's very easy to take a hit over 3000 to get gamed. But at this 2000 threshold, we have access to the most our deck can offer to be able to control and stem the flow of damage. This allows us to pick and choose how the rest of our opponent's aggression will play out to best determine which hits we can take and which hits we can stop to make the greatest use out of our resources. Now you may be thinking, regardless of how good these traps are, is it worth putting yourself at such a low life total to play the game? Well, fortunately, thanks to the number of cards designed to take advantage of our low life, it absolutely is. One such card is our next trap in our 3 Ferret Flames. Ferret Flames is a trap card that can only be activated while the combined attack of your opponent's monsters is greater than your life points. In achieving this, Ferret Flames forces your opponent to send monsters they control to the graveyard until the total attack of their field is less or equal to your life points. Now in most decks, this effect will be very hard to take advantage of, but with the Dinomorphia traps easily putting you at such low life counts, it's almost guaranteed that you will be low enough to wipe a field with Ferret Flames effect. Consider this, in 2 trap activations, you will be at highest 2000 life. Against the average boss monster field board, there is not a single monster on that field under that number, which in turn will force your opponent to send their entire field to fulfill the Ferret Flames. And fulfill is the key word here, because Flames imposes a game action onto your opponent, which gets around card immunity to remove any monster. This makes Ferret Flames a card that actively rewards you for playing the game with removal that very few decks can guard against. Wrapping up the traps, we round things off with some staple traps, starting with our 3 Solemn Judgment. Like our Dinomorphia trap, Solemn Judgment also requires half our life to activate, which helps us fill our own win conditions while backing up the deck with a flexible Omni Negation. Then we have 2 Solemn Strike for further summon and monster effect negation. Now, because Strike requires you to pay 1500 life to activate, there will be situations where this card becomes dead once you reach too low of a threshold. Fortunately, one of our Dinomorphia fusion monsters helps mitigate that to allow us to activate Strike regardless of our life total, which is half the reason we could jam a set life cost card like Strike in our deck. Next, we have 2 Trap Trick. Save for the Solemn Brigade and Sonic, all of our key traps in Domain, Alert, Brute, and Ferret Flames are all normal traps. This means we can tutor them out with our Trap Trick to have a few extra ways into either one as the game develops. And finishing it off, we have 2 Skill Drain. Now, thanks to its recent unlimiting, Skill Drain gives our deck a powerful switch plan at any point in the game. Because most of our deck is traps, we are hardly hindered by Skill Drain's negation. But inversely, the few monsters we do play pack fairly high attack values. This allows us to make use of skill drain to play some games as a pure beatdown strategy, backed by cheap beaters and traps to counter some of the top meta decks. Proceeding into the monsters, we start by introducing our 2 Dinomorphia monsters in our 3 Dinomorphia Theresia and 2 Dinomorphia Diplos. Both monsters have an effect that triggers on summon to generate advantage, with extra bonuses granted if you are under 2000 life. Theresia can set a Dinomorphia trap directly from the deck, and will gain an additional 500 attack if this is done under 2000 life. Inversely, Diplos can send a Dinomorphia card from your deck to the graveyard, and will burn your opponent for 500 if this is done under 2000 life. Both also have an effect when destroyed to banish a trap from the graveyard to special summon a differently named level 4 or lower Dinomorphia from the graveyard. Looking at both monsters, it's very clear that both are meant to help set up your traps. Theresia is another way to consistently access your traps, with her on-summon effect being able to set cards like Domain directly from the deck. Inversely, Diplos loads up the graveyard with traps to prime their graveyard effects or your monster's own float effects. Speaking further on those float effects, Diplos can also send a Theresia to revive with her own float effect later, which is another way into your traps as well. Furthermore, Theresia and Diplos' float effects also allows them to constantly cycle into each other so long as you have traps to banish. This allows you to continuously make use of their on-summon effects to grab traps to further fuel your plays. And because these float effects trigger off of any destruction, they combo fantastically with your Brute and Sonic to disrupt plays while also proactively advancing your own strategy. From there, we have our remaining dinosaur lineup consisting of 1 miscellaneous source, 1 soul-eating Oviraptor, and 1 ultimate conductor Tyranno. Each of these 3 cards aim to add an additional element to your Dinomorphia plays. Starting with our miscellaneous source insulates our Dinomorphia plays from general disruption. Given how crucial Theresia's effect can be in terms of setup, you would prefer to ensure that it resolves without complication. Miscellaneous Source, through its hand effect, protects your Theresia from things like hand traps and negations to ensure that you can always set up that all-important Domain or Sonic. Furthermore, given how fast we can dump our Dinomorphias into the grave through cards like Domain, Miscellaneous Source's graveyard effect can become usable late in the game to help us grab another level 4 dinosaur for extension. Our preferred target for that effect will most likely be our soul-eating Oviraptor. Capable of adding or sending any dinosaur from the deck, Oviraptor has multiple avenues of use in the Dinomorphia. At a simple level, it can be used to add or dump a Dinomorphia to put it into circulation. But at a more aggressive stance, it can also be used to grab our ultimate conductor Tyranno as well. Even more synergistic is Oviraptor's second effect, which can destroy one of your Dinomorphias to revive another Dinomorphia, in turn triggering the destroyed Dinomorphia's effect to revive a third Dinomorphia for twice the field presence. This allows Oviraptor to nexus you into a variety of powerful plays, ranging from OTKs to extra deck lines to further bolster your general trap board. Lastly is our ultimate conductor Tyranno. Crashing in at a whopping 3,500 attack points and packing the ability to attack every monster your opponent controls, UCT is a game ender all on its own, and this is crucial for the Dinomorphia deck. Due to how low we can put ourselves in terms of life, we are incentivized to end the game quickly to avoid having this become a liability as the game goes on. UCT provides the means to do so in one very easy body. Thanks to Domain, meeting the 2 dinosaur banish requirement is laughably easy, and thanks to Oviraptor, accessing UCT is never hard. Additionally, like Oviraptor, UCT's own disruption effect can also destroy your own Dinomorphias, which creates another avenue of disruption that also generates advantage on the side. Wrapping up the monsters with the hand traps, we're only playing the 3 Lord of Heavenly Prisons. Just like in our Exorciser deck profile, we're playing the Lords in this deck to help protect our backer from destruction, while also setting up a follow-up play in the coming turn. However, unlike the Exorciser deck, the Lord follow-up is meant to essentially transition to an OTK, for we can always set a Phosphodig to grab the Oviraptor to then UCT for game. Furthermore, because Lord resolves in hand to set the card from deck, it can even work under skill drain, which effectively adds 2 beaters to our board to end games that way too. Finally, wrapping up the main deck with the spells, we have a suite of consistency cards designed to help us dig into all the key pieces of our power plays. Firstly, we have the 3 Fossil deck to search into any of our dinosaurs, whether that be Theresia to access our traps or Oviraptor to access the UCT. Then we have the pot cards consisting of 3 Pot of Prosperity and 2 Pot of Duality. Now outside of our UCT, most of our special summons will be on our opponent's turn, and outside of our Dinomorphia fusions, we really aren't having to summon anything else out of our X deck. Thus, we can make use of cards like Prosperity and Duality to dig for cards without much hindrance to our strategy. Now you can also opt to play the Pot of Extravagance over the Prosperity for budget reasons, but doing so runs the risk of potentially banishing your crucial Dinomorphia fusions. Thus, it's definitely more preferred that you play the Prosperity over Extravagance if you can. Going into the X deck, we begin with our Dinomorphia fusions, starting with our 3 Dinomorphia Kentrangina. Requiring 2 different Dinomorphias to make, Kentrangina has a whopping 4,000 attack base, but loses attack equal to your life points. This makes Kentrangina another one of those monsters that benefits from your life loss. At full life, Kentrangina has no attack, but at low life, Kentrangina can be as powerful as a 3900 beater. This incentivizes you to quickly drop your life to boost Kentrangina's attack for greater survivability. Fortunately, Kentrangina also comes with a built-in means of achieving that. At the cost of half your life, Kentrangina can banish a Dinomorphia trap in your graveyard to copy its effect. This indirectly boosts her own attack, while also allowing you to double up on trap effects that would otherwise be hard once per turns. And that has huge ramifications. Just think about it. Being able to domain twice means that you can dump twice as many Dinomorphias into the graveyard while producing twice as many fusions. Alternatively, being able to alert twice means you can revive upwards of 4 monsters from your graveyard. At worst, being able to copy a Brute or Sonic allows you a second round of disruptions, while also triggering your Dinomorphias, including the Kentrangina, who also has the ability to float into any level 4 or lower Dinomorphia on destruction. At the simplest, we can always combine our Kentrangina with a skill drain to turn off her own debuff, to create cheap 4k beaters that can easily dominate fields on her own. This makes Kentrangina your primary fusion to access when summoning with Domain. Now alternatively though, you can also access the other Dinomorphia fusion in our 2 Dinomorphia Stealth Bergia. Unlike Kentrangina, Stealth Bergia has no attack, instead packing a sizable 2500 defense. While your life is 2000 or less, Stealth Bergia allows you to activate Dinomorphia effects or trap effects without paying life points. Furthermore, if your opponent would activate a monster effect, Stealth Bergia can inflict damage to your opponent equal to that monster's attack. And like all our other Dinomorphias, Stealth Bergia also floats into a level 4 Dinomorphia on destruction. Now one interesting thing to note about Stealth Bergia is its cost reduction effect. While it does allow you to play Dinomorphia effects without life cost, it also allows you to play any trap card without life cost as well. This expands well beyond your Dinomorphia traps to include cards like your Solemn Strikes and Skill Drains as well. Speaking specifically on Skill Drain, thanks to the fact that you pay cost first, Skill Drain will not resolve until after Stealth Bergia has applied, which means you can activate Skill Drain without life cost before it negates your Stealth Bergia. But even without Skill Drain, Stealth Bergia's effect to burn your opponent can be equally deadly. At low life points, it effectively prevents your opponent from playing, but at high life, it allows you to chip them for damage when they try to make big plays. This makes Stealth Bergia a much more defensive option to your Kentrangina, much better accessed in stabilized board states to edge you closer to big pushes. Finally, wrapping up the entire deck profile with the remainder of our X deck, we have a bunch of general X deck monsters. Now, a majority of these monsters are things we will rarely ever make, but can be accessed through the swarming effects of our Alert or Oviraptor. For the links, we're playing the 1 Dark the Dark Charmer Gloomy for countering those dark monsters like DPE, and the 1 Axis Code for ending games. For the Xyz, since all our Dinomorphias are level 4, we have the 1 Daigusto Emerald for recycling our Dinomorphias, 1 Exton for clearing the field, 1 Abyss Dweller for Graveyard Denial, 1 Evozar Dolka for effect negation of monsters, 1 Evozar Lavia for spell and trap negation and summons, 1 Utopia for blocking attacks to protect our life, but mostly to just make our Utopia Prime. Utopia Prime can detach 3 materials to pay until you have 10 life, to destroy as many of your opponent's special summon monsters, banish them, and deal 300 damage for each. This is a fantastic one-sided field wipe that also puts you at the lowest amount of life possible for your Dinomorphia effects. And lastly, we have the one Zeus if any of our Xyz battle. And that's going to do it for our Dinomorphia deck profile. So, what are my final thoughts? Well, the deck definitely has potential. With the ability to fuse from deck to very versatile boss monsters and several very powerful searchers and floaters, the deck is definitely scaled to contend with modern meta plays. Sadly, I feel like the deck is lacking a reasonable endgame. While Kentrigina and Stealth Bergia are impressive, they really don't do anything particularly detrimental to opposing boards. And for all of its consistency, the deck lacks a meaningful play disruptor outside of Brood for combo heavy decks. So for the moment, the deck has to rely on outside cards to carry it through to the finish line, and without a good way to search into them, it just isn't a deck that's consistent enough to take to a large event. But looking ahead, the next wave of support promises to change that with 2 more powerful cards in the horizon, and maybe we'll look at the deck again when that happens. Regardless, this has been Tony, your deck architect with a Dinomorphia deck profile. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you guys next time.